Welcome back to GTD. I'm Keegan Miller. That's Micah Farmer. As you can tell by my shirt, it's an Auburn baseball shirt. It's green. It's got 4-leaf clovers on it. It's St. Patrick's Day when we're filming this, also known as my holiday. Got the red hair and all. So I'm also like one of the tallest leprechaun ever, is what I've been told today. But yeah, it's St. Patrick's Day. But we have a lot of sports to talk about. An extra sport that we're going to add back to the repertoire this week, and that's MLB. But until then, we have racing to cover because that's what's happening right now. Mainly NASCAR. That's what this episode is. That's why you clicked on it. That's what you want to hear about. So let's talk about it. We just had Las Vegas. Tell us about the race.
Well, I was very excited with the outcome of it, with Josh Berry winning.
Yes.
I felt there was a little too much aero-blocking in this race. If your name was not Ryan Blaney or William Byron, you really struggled to pass cars other than Christopher Bell in the middle before he got sent back to nowhere in the back of the race. But overall for Vegas, decent racing. Obviously, I think the perception of the race is going to be improved because of the Wood brothers and Josh Berry winning this race. And this entire top three, Berry, Suarez, and then Ryan Preece, I don't think anyone would have expected. But if we can just talk about Josh Berry for a moment here, because it is the main story of it. How about the Wood brothers being, I believe, over the last 17 races, the Wood brothers are the third most winning team.
Yeah, they have 2 wins with Burton last year at Daytona and Berry now at Las Vegas. Berry has looked good in every race this season, not just Las Vegas. He only has 2 top 10s, but he's been in the running and in the mix. He's also got 2 top 5s, but he's been in the mix for a whole lot of races this year so far this season. And it just goes to show that maybe Harrison Burton just wasn't ready quite yet. He's kind of in that weird limbo phase. I mean, you were talking about it. We've talked about some other drivers in that weird limbo phase where they're great at Xfinity and will dominate in trucks, but just not quite ready for Cup. And we don't know what's going on behind the scenes as far as equipment goes and with the car itself and with the team.
And you look at Harrison Burton this year in Xfinity, and he's been running very well for a team that finished last in points last season. So in baseball, you talk a lot about a quad A player, a guy who's going to rip it up at AAA every time, but just can't seem to figure out the MLB pitchers. Maybe that's what you're seeing with Harrison Burton. Maybe he just doesn't like the next-gen car. Although whatever was the deal with him, it's got to be said that Josh Berry has come in, new crew chief for this team as well, and they have just taken off. Had probably top 5 speed at Atlanta as well, like you mentioned. Top 5 car at Phoenix all day. Berry drove from 30th back up to 4th at Phoenix, which you never see. At Vegas, that car was up in the top 5, top 10 all day. It was able to go by Daniel Suarez to win this race. So Wood brothers looking about the best they have since prime Matt DiBenedetto with them.
Well, are you a little scared right now for Josh Berry? Because I think the last at least 5, maybe 6 drivers to win in the Wood brothers 21 have only ever won once with that team.
Well, he's won. Oh, he has won once now. I was thinking he's won Phoenix for some reason.
No,
he did not win Phoenix. I'm not, because you look at the only other times these cars have really been this fast. Ryan Blaney had a lot of good runs with this car, but I think you would agree that even with Matt DiBenedetto and Ryan Blaney, that car would never run top 5 back-to-back at a short track and an intermediate. They usually honed in on one specific type of track they were good at. So I think you look at that combined with the very strong Penske alliance right now. Penske looks really good this season. They're leading a ton of laps. Obviously, not the wins you would want for those 3 cars, but I am not overly worried about the 21 falling off a cliff, especially when you look at some other teams that are kind of having an off year right now. I think that he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and you've always got, your Daytonas that they won last year and Talladega and Atlanta, which he already ran well this year.
And Berry loves Vegas, too, has 2 Xfinity wins here.
Yeah.
So if there's going to be a track where he's going to deliver, it's either going to be a short track or Vegas probably, because for whatever reason, he loves this place.
Yeah, and the next time Dale Jr. tells you a guy's going to win at the Cup level, you might want to sign that guy immediately, because Josh Berry was one of those guys, and here we are. We saw him fill in for Elliott, then get a seat at Haas last year, and now he's winning races with Wood brothers, which is a great organization to have back in victory lane and just in the sport in general. But let's talk about the racing itself. What was your highlights and kind of main things that stuck out to you from Vegas?
Well, my highlights were watching Christopher Bell carve his way through the field in Stage 2. That was very entertaining. Watching Ryan Blaney all day until he got caught up in the wreck. That car, I think we would both agree, was the fastest in this race.
100%.
Just was flying through the field. It felt like every time, just could not seem to get established up at the front, though, whether it be luck or penalties or whatever happened to him. But other than those couple instances, like I mentioned at the start, a lot of aero blocking in this race, which I know that's kind of the next-gen car at intermediate tracks, but still, I'd like to see a bit more ability to kind of go where they aren't for more cars.
Yeah. I think we'll see Hopefully, we see more of the good side of intermediate racing with these next gen cars this weekend in Miami, like we saw the last time we were at Miami. But Vegas, it's very similar to last year. Last year, the Vegas in the spring was an okay race, and then you saw a lot more diverse racing in the playoff race at Vegas. Kind of what you saw at Miami. The Miami race was okay, then you saw a lot more diverse racing in the fall with Miami. So I don't know if it's just these drivers early in the season not wanting to turn it into a wall or whatnot, or they're just more comfortable, or they're just more aggressive late in the season because you have guys that are out of the playoffs that haven't won. They're like, I just want to get a win this year.
Yeah.
You have guys trying to move on. I don't know what it is, but that kind of seems to be the shtick for the next gen and intermediate racing. But yeah, I agree. There was a lot of aero blocking. It felt more short tracky yesterday than intermediate to me. Now there were if you had a car and you could find a lane and use it, like we mentioned, Blaney and Bell. I mean, you could do that. Bowman did that for a little bit with Byron, him kind of going back and forth.
You shouldn't need a top 5 or 6 car to be able to make passes, though.
Right, and that's when I don't know if they brought a new tire. There was a new tire yesterday for left sides, or was it right sides?
I believe it was left.
Yeah, I think it was left sides as well. So they brought a new left side tire. I don't think it did anything to help, at least.
Yeah. Well, what it might have done is removed all the pit crew members' brain cells. Because let's talk about this for a moment. They mentioned it multiple times on the broadcast. I didn't know if all the pit crew members had gone out on the strip the night before or what, but this is one of the most mistake-riddled races on pit road.
Well, not just the crew,
in a while.
The drivers as well. So many pit road speeding penalties. Yeah. I mean, I think Elliott he was starting on point. He was about to lead the field to green. He had a big one, but he wasn't it. He had so many drivers. Kyle Busch, he was at the point, got back to the back.
Hamlin had a speeding penalty.
Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, they all had speedo penalties.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
And then you go to Joe Gibbs specifically, and you look at the absolute disaster for them. You had the Chase Briscoe wheel that went on vacation, as will the crew members. The Christopher Bell wheel that was going to go on vacation until he went into Chase Briscoe's pit box to get it tightened up. Then they sent him to the back because of that. Denny Hamlin's car was just slow most of the day until the final stage where he ended up top 10, and then he got trapped a lap down after pitting because of the late caution.
Yep.
And then Ty Gibbs still is nowhere to be found. He was the slowest car on the track for much of this race, and then just to top it off, got spun into his pit box backward by Hocevar.
Yeah, a lot of lackluster mistakes and moves and action on pit road. But on the track, it was mostly clean racing. I think there's that one incident that we'll talk about with Blaney and Bell and the 4 wide. But on the track,
it kind of is what it is. You're 4 wide down the back. And interviewing Blaney after, he said he thought there was 1 above, 2 below. There ended up being 2 above, 1 below. So just miscommunication. That's going to happen. Little log jam. Although shout out Ricky Stenhouse, who spun for no reason behind all of that by himself.
Before all that happened, he spun and was like, "Oh yeah, I didn't even have to spun. They had a caution." NASCAR was in his ear, like, "We need to precaution. We need to precaution." And then they just did it. We just did it for him. But yeah, I very clean racing. I don't think that's anybody's fault. Those things happen. I think Blaney handled that situation perfectly as far as the interview went. He didn't throw anybody under the bus. Even if his spotter was telling him the wrong thing, he still didn't throw him under the bus.
Yeah.
He just kind of owned
Chris
it.
Wright.
Yeah, he just kind of owned it and carried on, which, I mean, that's kind of what Ryan Blaney's either – he gets angry on the track, but by the time he's out of the car, he really cools off, and he's calm, cool, collected always. But Ryan Blaney drives a Ford, not a Toyota. And if you've noticed – other than Christopher Bell, which is Christopher Bell, who just won 3 races in a row, Toyotas were nowhere.
They had an absolute disaster. If we pull up the results here, as you go down through, you'll notice first Toyota, Christopher Bell in 12th. Then Chase Briscoe was the next highest finishing Toyota in 17th after he was multiple laps down earlier in the race, so solid recovery. Then your next 2 Toyotas are 19th and 20th, Riley Herbst and John Hunter Nemechek, who probably had the 2 cleanest days of any Toyotas out there. They didn't really have any huge mistakes, just where they ended up. Ty Gibbs came home 22nd, which I think is a minor miracle. Tyler Reddick, 24th, was leading late and then came into the pits, got trapped a lap down by the yellow. Bit of an unfortunate circumstance for Reddick. That's now 2 weeks in a row, in my opinion, where I think a top 5 was thrown away. The steering issue last week, the yellow flag this week. Same thing happened to Denny Hamlin as Reddick ended up 25th. Eric Jones got caught up in the Ryan Blaney incident. He came home 27th. Bubba Wallace also caught up in that incident, finished 28th. So if you're going through, there was 2 Toyotas who had a clean day that didn't do anything, and just a rough day. I think this is one of the worst intermediate performances overall we've seen from Toyota in a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, when we got to Phoenix and especially Vegas, this is what we kept saying, and everyone else was saying, oh, this is where Toyotas will come out to play. They've always kind of been a little bit behind on your super speedways, and then road courses are road courses. That's mostly the driver, especially with the next gen car. But yeah, intermediates and short tracks. I mean, they ran well at Phoenix, but intermediates are really where they shined last year. And if we've only had one under the books, we'll go to another one this weekend, and I'm sure Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, those guys are going to run well here.
Yeah, it's not like they didn't have speed. I think Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, and Bubba Wallace all had top 10 cars this race, just happened to get caught up in messes.
Yeah, and a lot of that was bad timing, like you mentioned with Reddick. Bell just from the get had a bad weekend. But I think this weekend, Denny Hamlin, he likes to run at Miami. I think your Toyotas will show up this weekend, and it'll kind of even out the field, like, oh, it's not the Toyotas, it was just a really rough weekend for one manufacturer, which is kind of how it lined up. But who's had the best weekend so far this year? William Byron. He's leading your standings. I know you may be shocked because you're like, well, Bell's won 3 races, and there's only been 6 races or 5 races.
The DNF at Daytona is coming in here clutch for William Byron as far as Christopher Bell not finishing that race. William Byron obviously has the Daytona 500 win. Christopher Bell, I think, finished in the 30s in that race. Yeah. Then a little bit lower down than Byron this past weekend in Vegas. So William Byron holds a 29-point lead over Christopher Bell. Then you almost double that gap to get to Tyler Reddick, who is tied in 3rd with Chase Elliott. Then the rest of your top 6 are the other 2 Hendrick cars, Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson. So 4 of your top 6 at this point in the year are Hendrick Chevys. You have your 2 Toyotas of Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick, who I think have been 2 of the quickest cars all season so far. And then once you get through those guys, you finally hit some Fords. Yep. Ryan Blaney still the highest one, dropped 3 positions after the rough week. Joey Logano still hanging around in 8th. Despite no top 10 finishes this year, this guy is piling up stage points, has 1 stage win, and has led more laps than any other driver in NASCAR this year so far. Then rounding out your top 10 right now are Chris Buescher, the top 10 factory, as the RFK social media calls him, for good reason. And then Ross Chastain sitting in the 10th spot.
Yeah, Chris Buescher is really the one name in here that if you were watching the races, you wouldn't really think like Chris Buescher's, that high.
Chris Buescher gives me such Matt Kenseth vibes.
But he's just consistent. The guy's just consistent. Like he just shows up at the end of races in the top 10.
It's like, oh, where did Chris Buescher come from? Oh, he finished 5th. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, like he's just kind of lingering. He's like if Kevin Harvick, instead of being the closer for wins, was like the closer for top 10s. Like he's just kind of there, and then bang, he's right there when he needs to be. He'll break through. He'll get wins this year. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about Chris Buescher at all. It's just you don't really. He doesn't have the dominant car yet, but that will come, especially with the Fords. When you go to your bigger tracks, he'll be there. You mentioned Ross Chastain. Then you have Bubba Wallace in 11th, who's had a very, very solid year. And
I think he could easily be higher, too. That car's been fast pretty much every week. I think this is the closest year we've seen so far of those top 2 23-11 cars being close together. Riley Herbst in 27th. But Bubba Wallace has vastly improved this season. Denny Hamlin, another Toyota up here in 12th, dropped a bunch of spots again after the rough showing in Vegas. Josh Berry now all the way up to 13th, so would even be in the playoffs on points. So 21 car running great. The rest of your current playoff grid right now, let's buckle in for this. Michael McDowell, John Hunter Nemechek, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Just as you expected.
Exactly.
But yeah, what a crazy final 3 now. There's a lot of season left. Things will shake itself out. Michael McDowell may win, like he may lock himself in anyways and be finished 17th in points. But yeah,
Spire needs to figure out how to build a race car and not a qualifying car.
Yeah, but I mean, Spire, Karsten Hocevar, I think he had top 5 speed. Had one of the faster cars in Las Vegas.
Top 10.
But he had a fast car in Vegas. He's had a fast car multiple times this year. So Spire looks like they're on the up and up. But yeah, Michael McDowell, Nemechek, and Stenhouse round out the playoffs as of now. Right below him, right below Stenhouse, you have Kyle Busch, who
dropped 9 spots in the points this weekend after the absolute catastrophe with the speeding penalty and the tire and everything.
Yeah.
Then a couple other notable guys who sit outside of your playoff bracket right now. Chase Briscoe, even with the reinstatement, sits 20th. I think one of the unluckiest guys in the season is here in 21st with Austin Cindric.
Yeah.
He's led the second most laps of any driver, finds himself 21st in points, and even climbed 11 spots this week, so was sitting 32nd the week previously. And then Brad Keselowski, sitting 30th in points right now, cannot seem to catch a break. Still no top 10s on the board and 2 DNFs already this season.
Yeah, and if you're someone like Kyle Busch, Ryan Preece, or Suarez, those are your first 3 out right now, who Preece has had a very good year so far to start his career with RFK. But if you're one of those guys and you're kind of like, okay, more guys are going to win. You're going to have a wild card win here and there. We just had one with Josh Berry. So you got to kind of start thinking about that to get your way safely into those top 16 to where a wild card doesn't knock you out. And the guy I'm looking at is Shane Van Gisbergen. He's 31st in points.
Yeah, he's winning a road course.
It's going to be hard for that guy not to win a road course this year. So that's pretty much a spot that he's taking up at 31st right now in points.
And finally, before we move on from the standings, if we can give a round of applause to Ty Gibbs and Cole Custer, who over the last 2 weeks, after many weeks of trying, have finally passed Jimmy Johnson in points. Congratulations, guys. Congratulations.
Yeah. You may not remember Cole Custer's driving this year for
and that's completely understandable because he's done nothing.
The Haas factory team. But yeah, he's had a rough start to the year, Ty Gibbs.
No, he was on camera in Phoenix when he got caught up in the wreck.
With the camera time, but those sponsors are happy.
Cold custard.
Ty Gibbs also just having a rough. We talked about it last week.
Having a rough career at this point.
Yeah, started very hot.
Imagine being washed in 22.
I remember. I think by Bristol last year, we were talking about when is this guy's win coming? It's coming fast.
Ever since summer of last season, it's just I don't know why, because in the middle of the summer, it's like, oh, Ty Gibbs is really unlucky with these mechanical failures. And then you enter the playoffs, like, Ty Gibbs is wrecking a lot. And then you start this year, and Ty Gibbs is slow. So I don't know what's happened. But obviously the guy has talent. You've seen what he's done in the Xfinity Series. At the start of last season, he had speed. I don't know what the disconnect is right now.
Yeah, man, hopefully it's just a learning curve, and I think he'll figure it out.
Heck of a sophomore slump, though, right now.
Yeah, hopefully soon. But that's all we have for this episode of NASCAR. You can tune into our preview for what would be Miami later in the week. We also have some F1, which finally went racing this week. So we can talk about that in the rain. Very, very interesting race. It's a good one. That'll be a good episode to tune into because we have a lot to talk about. And we'll also preview China this weekend and MLB. We'll have some picks up right before the season gets underway at 5 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday.
Yes.
So with that being said, we'll see y'all later.